So a callback is basically like a string around your finger that helps you remember to do something. Like every time you do this, make sure to do this first. And the way that it's implemented is with an empty method that does nothing, right? So the method does nothing, but you're still calling it every time you do something else. So that way, when you want to make a variation of this class, you can change what the callback does. And then, this is my mom's name. So, every time slap, okay, so since I said mom inherits from slapper, that means that mom can do, or a mom can do anything that a slapper can. So it can do slap, it can do before slap, and it can do local methods. Since I changed what before slap does, that showed up here because this object that I'm using is the version of this object that has this capability here. And then if you want to make another variation, slapper, then it's able to use the same method, do something else, and the reason that these are both calling before slap, even though we didn't change the definition of slap, is because it's a callback. It's already being called every time, and the typical way to implement that is by starting with an empty method and then just letting people redefine it. The reason you start with an empty method is because if you didn't have this, it would say, I don't know, that's undefined, I don't know what to do. And if that happens, then it's an error. So, yeah, like every method that you call has to go somewhere. It can't just be unknown. Like every node that you get has to be somewhere in your like secret dictionary. Otherwise, the object will tell you, wait a minute, I have no idea. So. So this method that I'm using, puts, it stands for put string, and a string is just like, it's a sequence, it's like a word or a phrase or a sequence of letters and numbers. The reason it's called string is because it's kind of like a necklace with your name on it, where like each bead has one letter on it. But yeah, string is a really commonly used word in programming, and that's what the S in put S stands for. Okay, so I showed you how to make a callback. There are already some callbacks that are built in. And the first one that happens is called initialize. And that gets called right after the new method that I showed you at the beginning. I'll explain this in just a second. So, attribute accessor is a really great part of Ruby. It gives you basically some things that you're very likely to use anyway. It gives you a getter, a setter, and an instance variable. A variable, the way I like to explain that is like a box. You can put anything in the box, and then you can take out as many copies of it as you ever want. And in Ruby, it doesn't matter how big the thing you're putting in into the box is, it will always fit. You don't have to tell anyone anything about the size of the box or even that you need a box. Like as soon as you put something in, it's good to go. But if you don't put anything in and you try to take something out, it will give you this object called nil, which represents nothing. It represents the idea that nothing is there. So let's change this up a little bit. If slap phrase puts slap phrase else and just like you have to match up a class with an end and a def with an end, you have to match up an if with an end. But you can put an else in there if you want, and it still keeps the same end. So now, mom is, before she slaps somebody, she's going to check if she has anything in this box. And then if that happens, then that's going to be what she says before she slaps something. So this is her new warning that you're going to get slapped. And a cool way to shorten this up a little bit is like so. Okay, so remember how I said if you try to take something out of the variable before putting it in, it will give you nil, right? And if you say, if you're doing a conditional on nil, it will say false. Like most objects in Ruby will say true, even 0, which is uncommon. Like most languages consider 0 to be false. But nil is always false. And since taking something out of an empty box is nil, line 22. Can anyone see the syntax error? Okay, here we go. So, right, if this is not anything, then it will jump right over to here. But if this does return something that's not false, this part will never even get executed. So that's like that's a really great tool where you can say like, and again, it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can say, if we're in this situation, go for it. If we're in the default situation, I've got a backup right here behind that little board. So I feel like this needs a little more explanation. Why did I say self here? If I take that out, then it goes back to the default. This variable never gets populated, and there's a good, well, basically what's happening is if you don't have the self, this is considered a variable. If you do have the self, then it's considered a method, and it uses the getter method, or the setter method, to set the value of that variable. So, does anyone have any questions?
Do you recommend any tutorial websites or?
Yeah, I think the best website for getting started is called railscasts.com. But there are many. Actually, there are a lot of good tutorials that I can show you. All right, thank you guys so much. It's been really